1. Welcome to Made for More Living.
One small step for man.
With Johnny Jennings.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
The fastest and most exciting hour of news, events, and real estate in Northern California.
And this is a fact that was proved.
Powered by eXp Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
Does everybody know what time it is?
Get ready. Here we go.
If you are thinking about buying or selling a home, we have the show for you today. We're going to be covering the topic that most people overlook, and it costs them thousands of dollars when buying or selling a piece of real estate. With us today, we have Matt Zinger with Goodlife. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, greetings, everybody. Thanks for having me. I've been in the industry for 10 years. I kind of did it backwards. Started in the management side for 5, and then decided that it was easier to clean up my own problems than other people's problems. So I went into the inspecting, doing the termite or pest inspections for escrow transactions. And I've been doing that for almost 6 years now. With Goodlife Inspections, we're a bigger group of 4 different companies, all construction related. I work for the inspection division, Goodlife Inspections. We formerly were North American Home Services.
Got it. So you've been doing this a while, at least 6 years on the inspection side?
Yep.
And so what are some of the craziest things? So you've been in and out of houses all day long for the last 6 years. What are some crazy things that you've seen when inspecting properties?
I've seen a lot of crazy things. So it's like take your pick. I know there's one that's in particular that in Granite Bay, it was a fairly large listing. It was over $1 million. The owner had to move for business, and we did an inspection of the house. It was, I think, a 6,000 square foot house with a really fancy facade. It was all brick and slate stone. And during the inspection, we found some warped, like, windowsills. And there's a certain amount of warping that's normal, which is wear and tear. That's like a fiberboard product, so it's pretty susceptible to moisture. But these ones were fairly bad. And that's an indication that the windows have failed, like they're leaking into the house or into the wall. And this was also facing south, which is the weather side of the house. So it's getting direct rain on basically everything, right? And you get on the other indirect weather sides, they're not getting that direct water contact. So we went under the house. There was, some evidence of water in the sub area. It was insulated. So you had these insulation battens covering a lot of stuff up. We opened up an area as like a further inspection to see what we're dealing with. Yeah. And it turns out that the majority of the front of this house, that the lower level windows had all been leaking, and we had to deconstruct the whole front of the house. And then it led into a brick facade that was an archway that was super technical. And I mean, long story short, it was a 2-month repair.
Wow.
2-month repair was $120 grand.
$120,000 repair.
Oh yeah. And it was.
So when you first saw the warped windows,
Yep.
What was your thought? Like, this is how much, like, what did you think it was going to be?
My first thought was, oh no.
Oh gosh.
And then after that, it was, this could be like a $60,000 job, just because the siding was so difficult, because then we have to put it back together and match. Mm-hmm. So taking it apart, we're going to try and salvage what we can salvage, because finding matching material is difficult.
So was that an issue when it was first constructed? They built it poorly, or what was the problem?
They had brick windowsills on the outside, so that's pretty heavy, right? And then you flash a window when you put it in, but that flashing is going to last so long. And then when they did this brick, they put a right angle, like a piece of steel right angle metal to support the bricks so they wouldn't sag. And eventually over time, when it's getting hit with the sun, so the house is expanding and contracting with the heat, and then you got water also being introduced for the winter period, it just sprung a leak. And then that water is just constantly testing that flashing. And flashing around a window is not like metal. They're using like a mastic or like a building paper type material. So over time, you get that wet and then dry it out, wet and dry it out. It becomes brittle, cracks, and then boom, you got water in a wall.
Wow.
So when I first saw it, I was like, okay, hopefully this is, just like somebody sleeps with the windows open. And once we opened it up, that wasn't the case.
Oh my gosh. So when you saw that, did you think, is this like, Were the buyers expecting something of this magnitude?
The buyers were not.
Did the sellers know that there was an issue?
The seller was not as well. And he bought the house 3 years previously and had an inspection. And I'd say that condition had been there at least 5 years. The amount of damage that it had done, you're talking, at least 5 years of moisture exposure. We're only getting rain a couple months a year.
Yeah. So the inspectors he had out when he bought the home, who is now the homeowner.
Yep.
The inspectors did not catch this.
They missed it. And they had plantation shutters. So it's just on the south side and the west side. Goodlife, we pride ourselves on the thoroughness of our inspections. So, our guys are trained. But when you have these plantation shutters, you don't need to necessarily open them all. But on the south and the west side of the house, those are the direct weather sides. Mm-hmm. It really, you should. Because you find something like this. You either see it from the outside, and if you don't open those shutters, you miss it. And that would have been a $120,000 miss that a buyer would have been saddled with.
So what ended up happening with the buyers and sellers on that?
Well, in that case, the buyer really wanted the house, and they had actually prematurely removed contingencies. So he was in. He couldn't leave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Ooh. And then the guy selling the house was an attorney for a mining company. So he was astute at law. And he agreed to cover, I think it was $50,000 to $60,000. So then we had this, windfall of like $70,000 or $60,000. And so we had to. There's quite a bit of going back and forth.
Yeah.
We opened some more stuff up just to make sure we knew like what exactly we were estimating. It turns out that the seller was actually a pretty level-headed guy, and they split it.
That's cool.
Interesting.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. It's not one of those things that we're looking forward to. Because, I was there weekends. I met so many people at that house and walked it so many different times.
And that's unusual, too, that the seller would be willing to play ball.
Especially without contingency. Like with contingencies removed, the buyer was in.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and if you're selling a house or you're buying a house and and the buyer has removed their contingencies, right, that buyer is locked in. They have to move in on that home. Yep. They have to perform, or they lose their deposit potentially.
Yep.
And so it's which do you want?
I've seen others similar to that where they neglected to do a pre-list inspection to understand the house before they marketed, and then they do inspections, right? And you're on this timeline. You're on an escrow timeline. So you now have a deadline that this stuff has to get done.
Yep.
So we go doing inspections, and it turns up, some substantial findings, like over $10,000. And now if they had leverage, it's now moved over to the buyer side because you have these larger repair conditions that need to be addressed.
Yeah. So the Granite Bay story, that's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Warped windows turned into $120,000 in damages. But like, what's more common? Like, because as a real estate agent, when I see decking, I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
You're not the only one.
Yeah. What do you see when you see a deck?
When I see a deck, the first thing I see is what side of the house is it on, and is it covered? Mm. Covered decks, like if they have a patio cover, any kind of cover to deflect weather, they tend to be in better shape. And then, obviously the side or the orientation of the deck matters. If the south side or west side decks, they tend to be damaged more often because they're exposed to the weather more, right?
Yep.
If you're on the north or the east side, you're opposite weather. So they don't get hit quite as hard. They don't get that direct sunlight. So what we see normally is surface fungus, which doesn't mean that the wood has to be removed, right? It just means it has to be scratched off and treated with a fungicide. So that's like best case scenario. Mm-hmm. What's more common is we'll find sections of the deck where either the decking is damaged or it's an indication of the joisting, like the framing, the structure of the deck is damaged. And the thing with decks is once you start taking them apart, you have a lot of wood to wood connection, and you start deconstructing, and it just turns into a can of worms. So it's like, it's no inspectors don't like looking at decks either, because we know how it fits into deals, and it can definitely change the landscape or end at escrow.
Correct. Yep. So decks are a problem. And then a lot of people are surprised to hear that there's termites in the area.
Yes.
Right. So how often do you run into that? What does that look like?
Well, Sacramento is, if you didn't know, Sacramento is a termite prone area. We're in the valley. We have rivers, all that stuff. And it used to be a lot of orchards. So you got a lot of wood in the ground. Our most common termite is subterranean termites. There's like a part frog, part termite. Anyways, so subterranean termites are the most common. They live in the ground, come out of the soil, feed on the wood, and then take it back into the ground. There's a misconception. People hear termites and they tend to panic. It's not optimal. You don't want termites.
Sure.
But the average treatment for, eradicating termites is about $1,200 to $1,500 if you have a standard size house. And the good thing about termites is once you treat the house, the termites stop doing damage. Dry rot's not quite like that. So, what I tell people when we're doing walkthroughs and you find termites is like, look, I understand that there's a stigma and, the word termite can be a trigger, but realistically, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like dry rot can be much worse. It's an infection, right? So termite damage, you stop the termites, you stop the damage, you can reinforce that wood. It doesn't have an infection that's going to continue to spread. Dry rot, on the other hand, has to be removed and replaced. You can't reinforce it. You have to take it out and then put something new back in.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. It's people tend to look over dry rot and they focus on termites when the reality is, unless termites have been at a property for a long time, they usually don't do very much damage.
Termites and mold, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we don't say that word because you have to have a license.
Yeah. You can't say the M word. Can't say the M word. But people, it's black mold. I don't think so.
Tell you that.
I don't think so. It looks more like mildew to me. But so many people freak out. And the hard thing about a lot of these inspections, if you haven't done the pre-list, which we'll talk about in a later segment, but it's unknown to the seller. The seller can only disclose what they know. And the buyer's getting these reports from companies like yours, like Goodlife, where they're like, what? This is insane. How did the seller not know? And so it's a total game changer, because how do you know if there's subterranean termites in your house? Like, how would you tell how would you tell?
Well, an arrays found, you really only a pest inspector or a termite inspector is going to know that. And what happens a lot with the sellers is they'll have normal pest control. And so they think that is a way to maintain the house. Those guys are looking for just bugs. We have different licenses. So pest control guys have a license to call out or, write recommendations based on rodents, ants, things like that. They aren't trained in dry rot or fungus, and they're not trained in termites. So they're not looking for those things. So if you have pest control and you think that they're checking your house out like that, they are not. And we'll see people who think, oh, we have normal pest control we have for 5 years. The house is pristine, right? And that's not the case. In a raised foundation, meaning, it's got a concrete perimeter footing that the house is built on, and then underneath the house is an open area or a void. Those homes, really, you should have them inspect every 3 to 5 years because termites can show up anywhere, and usually they'll come up in the sub area because it's darker, it's not hot, right? It's usually pretty moist or wet. And so that's like the conditions that they prefer. In a slab house, this is my personal experience, 90% of the time in a slab house, if you have termite infestation, it's going to start on the firewall in the garage.
Really?
There's 2 different slabs. You have a garage slab that's, poured and engineered to carry a car and, the structure. The main slab of the house is just meant to carry people, their furniture, and the house. So they have an expansion joint between the 2 slabs. And for whatever reason, the termites, they find that joint, and it's a hop, skip, and a jump right into the wall.
Wow.
So like 90% of the time, if you have a slab, the firewall or the common wall between the house and the garage, that's usually where you want to focus.
Got it. And so by focus, you mean just doing your inspections or treating the wood?
If you're just living in the house, right? I mean, a lot of people have a fridge in there and they'll store their sports gear and all that stuff. So you really can't see the concrete or the curb, the base of the wall in the garage because it's obstructed. But if you were, attuned to that and hyper diligent about your house, you could check on that every so often and just go along and look at the curb and try and identify. I mean, they're pretty distinct mud tubes. And, you're not going to have mud or dirt in your garage like that. It's like on the wall, it's in a tube, it's pretty obvious. And you can just go online and check out what mud tubes look like or subterranean termite tubes and have an idea.
So you see them and you're like, uh-oh, what do I do?
And then you call a termite company. Yeah, call Goodlife and we'll come out and give you a good deal on getting rid of them.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for sharing some of those stories. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about the dark underbelly of inspection companies because there are some things you need to look out for. Coming up fast.
So if you're listening to today's show and you're wondering what kind of offers could Johnny Jennings and the Tom Daves team get me for my home right now, easy way to find out, give Johnny Jennings a call at 855-TOM-DAVES. Better yet, go to the website tomdaves.com, type in your address, bam, right away you find out what kind of offers you would get, the low and high end, and how much you would get if you wanted a cash offer today, no matter what kind of condition your home is in. The website again is tomdaves.com.
This is Made for More Living with Johnny Jennings, powered by eXp Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we are covering things that make or break a real estate transaction. Today we have a special guest, Matt Zinger with Goodlife, and we are going to be covering the dark underbelly of inspections. These are things that if you're looking to buy or sell a house, you have to be aware of because they will cost you thousands of dollars if you don't handle this correctly. Matt, what are some things that separate, like when you've come in and you've been asked to provide an additional inspection, meaning somebody's already been to the property, already inspected it, but for whatever reason they're wanting a second opinion. What are some common things you run into that the other company didn't catch?
So the first thing is, like Goodlife Inspections, we will give you a second opinion or a competitive estimate for free. So you're not going to have to pay for it again, right? Some companies will, some companies won't. We do a free inspection for a competitive bid every time.
That's huge, guys.
Yeah, it helps out. I mean, you don't want to pay for it twice. And we appreciate the opportunity to come in and give our perspective. So what I see the most as far as when people end up in situations where they either they don't trust the pest report they got, or the estimates are really high, or the recommendations are kind of extreme for repairing, is typically like on a raised foundation, there's lack of faith in what was called under the house, right? And so this is where pictures fit in. Like we at Goodlife, or formerly North American, we take pictures in the sub area because we understand if you have a raised foundation, that is a focal point of that inspection because nobody's going to go under the house.
Doesn't everybody take pictures though?
No, everybody doesn't. And that's the thing.
You're kidding.
It's 2024. We should be taking pictures. You have smartphones, right? You have little cameras that are pretty durable. Why not? But they don't. And so, you can have these substantial findings, whether it's leaky toilets that have damaged the whole floor and you got to rip a bathroom floor out or something. And then there's no pictures to validate that, right? And then a seller is like, well, that estimate is pretty hefty.
Yep.
Or
the buyer.
Yeah. And how come we don't have any pictures of it? So, I mean, that's something that we focus on. If we're going to go into a house, we're going to take pictures so that people can at least have a frame of reference to understand what we called. Right. And so what I see a lot as far as, what can be overturned in a second opinion is there are conditions. One of them is milled beetles, where the tree before it was milled had a beetle infestation. They cut it down, they season it, so the beetles die. But there's evidence when they mill it, they cut across these galleries and it looks similar to what a beetle infestation would be. Now, beetles are a moisture related pest, not like termites, and they can be difficult to find. But because they're moisture related, there's a smell. I mean, if you've been doing this a long time, you kind of know when to be alert. Mm-hmm. And you'll have companies call that milled beetle, which isn't an active wood destroying condition. It's a previous condition that's just showing up when they milled it. And they'll call that as an active beetle condition, which requires a fumigation, the most expensive fume. It's a 5-day tent. To make sure. So
when the circus comes to town, that's because milled beetles?
Yeah, and you're getting all 3 rings, like with with the beetles. So, and then you have to do something about the moisture. And so usually there's a vapor barrier or some kind of moisture control recommendation. They can get upwards of, $6,000 to $8,000 to correct a beetle condition. And I've seen plenty of reports where the first inspector called beetles and has a large estimate because of the beetles, and then go under there and find out it's milled beetle. The sub area is perfectly dry. There's no excessive moisture, and it's really not an accurate, it's not an accurate depiction of the conditions under the house. And they don't have pictures of it. So there's no way for anybody to look at the pictures and go, oh, okay, I see, right? Because some agents that have been around the block, right, they know, they've dealt with this before. So, I mean, this is another reason why I I tell agents, or I recommend to agents, like if you have a pest inspector you trust, stick with them. Stick with that person, ride to die. Like, Goodlife, we pride ourselves on our relationships. We try to form relationships with agents just because we understand how they do business. And, there's certain things that we do that we have to do. What I tell people is findings are facts. So we just have to find the stuff. The recommendations to repair them are subjective. And if you have an inspector who's invested with your agent and your clients, they're going to do what they can to do what's best for everybody.
Yep.
And so it's, I have a vested interest in your business because I want you to look good. And I also want to make my company look good as well.
Yep. And there's a couple of takeaways that I got from hearing about this meal beetles situation, or just inspectors in general. One is that you do the free re-inspects. So if anything looks fishy, if anything's off, whether you're a buyer or a seller, call Goodlife, and they almost said North American. Call Goodlife, and they'll come out and do the inspect for free. It costs you nothing. It could save you thousands and thousands of dollars. That's thing number one.
Yep.
Thing number two is, why are people not taking photos? Like, I'm still hung up on that you can say, hey, there's $10,000 in repairs that need to be made. Okay, show me the photos. Oh, I can't. It was too dark.
It's a lot of trust. I don't agree. I mean,
if somebody changes the brake pads on my truck and they say, hey, you need new brake pads, I'm like, okay, show me the old brake pads.
Correct.
Oh, they're in the trash. What are you talking about? Like, why did you do that?
Yes.
Show me the brake pads. Like, prove to me that I need new brake pads.
Yeah, and show it to me before you fix it.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. If you end up having to negotiate out repairs in the escrow period, and you have all these findings, thousands of dollars of repair in the sub area, but nobody showed you any proof of that it's really there. I mean, that's, you're taking a leap of faith. And you're exposed.
Oh, and it just hit me too, but you're talking about like realtors working together with the inspectors and with their clients and doing what's right. When you're buying a house, sometimes that buyer's agent might bring an inspector along. And sometimes, what most people don't realize, so when we talk about, hey, this can make or break a transaction, this can cost or save you thousands of dollars, it's this moment right here.
Leverage.
In the request for repairs, right? So there's the initial offer process where you're, hey, I'll bid more than the other person. Hey, my offer is strong. I'll put this much money down. You get the house under contract. Boom. Okay. Then there's a second negotiation that takes place. Seasoned agents know, hey, well, let's get our offer accepted, and then let's rake them over the coals in the request for repairs.
Yep.
And so that's why you need to call, like, if you're a seller and you're getting raked over the coals on the request for repairs, and you're like, that doesn't make sense. Why are they saying we need to do all this stuff? That wasn't here before. I've lived in the house. I've had no issues. We had an inspection done previously. There were no findings. Call Goodlife, have them out there, and they can save you thousands of dollars.
I'm currently helping somebody with something like this.
Tell us about that. Can you share?
So it's a house in Auburn, a very nice house, huge deck. It's composite decking. Most of the framing is pressure treated, so it's weather resistant, right? It's gonna have less of an issue than a wood deck, even a redwood deck. It doesn't it's more sturdy, more durable. So they had a first inspection, no pre-list. So the buyer brings in their inspector. The agent trusts him. He had a bad day. He was very aggressive. I know the guy from past experiences. So he goes out there, and it's a type of siding that's not it's a wood-based product, but it's not wood. It's a lap siding that's press board, right? An engineered wood. So, you could say it's a beefy cardboard siding.
All right.
And if you poke it in a certain way or probe it, which is what we do to check for dry rot, if you poke it in a certain way, you can get you can have that siding fail or look like it's failed, even though it's not a wood destroying condition. And because of, I guess, his state of mind at the time, he went a little aggressive.
They look like giant lances for those of you who haven't seen them before. Like if you've watched, what was it?
The
A Knight's Tale or whatever. Yeah, they look like giant lances, and they're just shoving it into the trim all over the place. So I could see how if someone's having a bad day.
And he was going in underneath. So at the bottom of the lap, he was going in at the thin side. So, that it's weathered, and he's going to slice into it.
So he said there were findings.
And then the deck, it's already the type of material, it's not going to fungus damage. Now, it had fungus growth on it, which needs to be scraped or pressure washed, but it wasn't structurally, compromised. And he essentially told the buyers that it wasn't worth it. Like that this house was a potential disaster, like the water could have been getting in the walls and all these just alarming things, right? And the agent was smart enough to say, hey, you are my guy, but this is obviously a bad day for you. And got in contact with me. I went out there and looked at the house. It was a hefty estimate. Right now I'm working on, kind of whittling the number down to get to something that's agreeable for both sides. But it wasn't as bad as he made it seem. And some of the stuff that had been probed really wasn't damaged, and it just needs to be bondoed or wood filled. And so it's like the tale of two inspections. And he actually, at the point where they were going back and forth and it got a little contentious, he basically said, I'm not writing a report on this house.
Why?
I know your guess is as good as mine. Okay. But so I really am the first to throw down a report on the house, but I'm the second to inspect.
Interesting.
And he was telling them it was, tens of thousands, like $30,000 to fix this.
Verbally. He's telling them verbally.
Yeah, verbally. That it's going to be really expensive. And it's a tall house. It's got 3 stories. It's built on the side of a hill. But it's, my estimate was big, but not that. And I didn't see any indication of water in the wall. So like my story was a polar opposite.
Wow. And this is something that kind of, I can't be the only guy that's frustrated with this, is sometimes it feels like an inspector comes in there and it's like they're paid on commission. It's like the more findings.
We are. I mean, kind of.
But it's like the more findings they have, like the better they're doing their job, whether or not the finding is accurate.
Yes.
And so for somebody to come in there and there's no ramification against, like, there's no repercussions for them.
Well, we have a board, so you can complain to the board. The Structural Pest Control Board they're our regulatory body. Oh. So there's only 4 states that have structural pest control boards, and those are the states with the most biodiversity, like as far as this stuff goes. So it's Hawaii, California, Texas, Florida. So they have state-run agencies that oversee us. Part of that is because we're applying pesticides around houses, right? And they want to make sure we're doing it safely. The other is because we have so much diversity as far as wood-destroying organisms that they want to make sure that we're doing our job thoroughly. And, you're talking about a purchase of a house, like even if half of society doesn't, right? So half does, they might do it once, twice in their life. Yeah. And it's a lot of money. So they want to make sure that we're on the up and up. I mean, that's why we have state licenses. So, and we have to renew those licenses every 3 years because they want to make sure that we're up to snuff.
Yeah.
And so, also the free market, if you do spurious inspections and you give, outrageous estimates, agents talk.
Yeah.
And you're going to get crushed. I mean, you're not going to be in business very long.
But here's the thing, that those bad actors tend to cling and they tend to find business crazy. Regardless. It's
frustrating.
It's just incredibly frustrating to me because I'll speak. I was talking to one guy in a cigar lounge the other day, and I was like, he's like, yeah, I try to find everything wrong, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, what if that isn't an issue? Well, it could be an issue. So I'm disclosing and I'm letting them know. And it's like, why are you saying
there's a liability angle, right?
Yeah.
So like what commonly will happen with us is you do an inspection. I mean, Goodlife, we have very good inspectors, right? And we try to avoid these, be proactive and not reactive. But if you have situations that you're not at least identifying, it doesn't have to be a finding. You're not noting or disclosing. They're going to negotiate however they do. The house closes and then something turns up. The first thing they're going to call the agent and say, hey, this happened. And then we're going to get a phone call and it's going to say, how come you didn't catch this? And if I would have known this was there, this is like every time.
No.
If I would have known this was there, I would have negotiated on it. Yeah. Right. So
or I wouldn't have bought the house.
That's it. Yeah. And so who's liable? Right. And so, when we do an inspection, there is some liability because of that. Right. You want to negotiate on the reality of the house or the conditions. But if we don't repair it and clear it, our liability has an endpoint. You know what I mean? And so, but we don't want to see somebody get, the short end of the stick, especially when you're doing something like buying a house. Like that's supposed to be exciting. And when you end up finding something that's, malfunctioning or failing, and it costs a lot of money, usually you're pretty strapped when you move into a house.
I agree. It's just so frustrating when an inspector makes a big deal out of nothing.
The finding isn't the problem. It's the recommendation for the repair.
It's the recommendation. Right? And if the finding's even accurate.
That's it.
Right?
That's it. So the finding, you can have a lot of findings. I don't like a lot of findings because it's big reports. And that means I got to write them. Right? So I'd rather have accurate conditions, right? Mm-hmm. It's how you repair those conditions. And a lot of times they'll sandwich them into one big recommendation.
Got it.
So you get a bigger price and it's harder to justify. Like I'll have the same siding, but there'll be 3 different findings because the recommendations to repair them are different. Some can be dug out and filled. Some of them have to be removed and replaced.
Got it. Hey, so thank you so much, Matt, for the input on that. What we're going to be doing when we come back is we're going to be going over findings, common issues, how to find them, how to avoid them, and what to do if you do stumble across them. Thank you so much for listening.
Did you know that no matter what your home or pest inspection report says, Johnny Jennings and the Tom Daves team can help you sell your home, put it on the market. Even if you don't have the time or the money to make those repairs, they can help with that. Just go to tomdaves.com, type in your address, find out what kind of offers you would get on your home and how much you would get if you wanted a cash offer today, no matter what kind of condition your home is in. The website again is tomdaves.com or give Johnny Jennings a call at 855-TOM-DAVES.
This is Made for More Living with Johnny Jennings, powered by eXp Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
Welcome back to the show. We are covering the things that make or break a real estate transaction when it comes to inspections. And we've already covered how warped windowsill can go from being just a potential issue to a $120,000 repair. We've gone over how people may say, and other inspectors, non-reputable inspectors may say, it's a $10,000 repair, and really, there's not even a problem to begin with. So how do you, so we've already covered a lot of ground. We got Matt Zinger here with Goodlife helping us out today. He's a special guest. And what we're going to cover now are common issues that you come into, that you find when inspecting a home, and really what homeowners can do to prevent these costly mistakes and repairs from being needed to take place. Matt, what's the number one thing you run into?
So I'd say off the bat, before I jump into that, is as far as maintenance on a house, what I recommend to homeowners is if you're on a slab house, stucco or wood siding, to have it inspected every 5 years at least, right? On a raised foundation, I'd say every 3. Because you have that sub area that's nobody's looking at, right? And you can have a leak, and it's better to catch it earlier than before it does damage, right? Catch it early, you can fix it. It doesn't do a bunch of damage.
So when you say inspection, like what can people expect cost-wise?
So at Goodlife, we have, I think a slab house is $150, and then a raised foundation is $180. But you can do what we call a limited, right? You can do a targeted inspection. So if, say, the homeowner's pretty savvy, right, and is keeping up their house, they're good on maintenance, pay for just a crawl, and then you're looking at like $100. So you just call a termite company and say, hey, I need my sub area crawled and a foundation inspection. I don't need you to look at the siding or the inside, just the foundation and whatever. Now, if you have a raised foundation, we're going to have to run the plumbing because we want to find plumbing leaks. So you're going to have to go inside and run the plumbing just so we can get a good look when we go into the house.
By run the plumbing, you mean have the faucets on, the showers on?
Yeah, let the sinks run for a couple minutes, flush the toilets, let the showers run for a little bit, just so we can run water through the pipes. That way when we go into the house, it's like 2 birds, 1 stone, right? But what I see most commonly, and it's wear and tear, is the south and west side of the house aren't maintained properly, and then you have a concentration of conditions. So, what I tell people is, hey, if you gave me 10 pest reports and you lined them up in front of me, just the diagrams, I could tell you the south side of the house just based off those diagrams.
Wow.
Because the concentration of the findings are usually on the south and the west side, with the southwest corner being like what I call ground zero. That's your most weather exposed corner, right? The sun trails east to west. So the south side's getting the longest exposure to sun or heat, right? And sun does a lot of damage to your siding if you have wood siding. And then the rain typically in the Sacramento region comes from the southwest. So we have rain that's driving from the southwest to the northeast. So what I see trend-wise is the south and west side is where you're going to have those maintenance-related issues where your deferred maintenance is going to catch up with you. And then the northeast corner of the roof is usually where you have some kind of fungus condition or failure because the rain drives into that corner. I say 90% of the time. I mean, I'm making up these, percentages, but in my experience, it's 90% of the time. It's either a roof line, wood member, the eave itself has dry rot, because the gutters, they get overwhelmed. You're opposite side. You're on the receiving side of the rain, right? And it's coming down. Usually there's a downslope of the roof. So it's coming down with a good amount of speed. It overruns the gutter, and then everything gets wet. And you get it wet long enough. I mean, it's not sun exposed. It's northeast corner.
Yeah.
Right? But you get it wet long enough, and the wind's blowing that way, it's going to put leaves in that gutter, like you're going to have overflowing gutters. So for whatever reason, that northeast corner is where you're normally going to find a roof issue.
That's fascinating. So whether or not you're even thinking about maintaining your property, you're out there looking at homes, this is good information to have. Southwest, look for damage. Northeast, look for damage.
Yep, in the roof. In the roof. Yep.
Wow.
And it's like, so the home inspectors will tell you, hey, paint your house every 6 to 10 years. I mean, painting is expensive, especially if you have a bigger home, right? 2 stories, and how many colors you use matters. So that might not be feasible. But depending on the orientation of your house, like if your front of your house is facing south, paint the front of your house every 6 to 10 years. Paint the front and the west side every 6 to 10 years. The east side usually isn't exposed to people to see, right? And the south side's your backyard.
Yeah.
So if you don't paint those sides, or the north side's your backyard, well, the north side's not getting sun. So that paint's going to stay fresh, right? Longer.
Yeah.
And then, so the south side's going to get beat up. The west side's going to get beat up. If you paint those 2 every 6 to 10 years, you're doing your due diligence. You're redoing caulking. You're putting a new coat of skin in the paint over that, part of the house. So you're giving the house what you can to, fight back against weather. And
what's important about this is, well, one, just paying $100 for the inspection every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, on a raise, just to crawl. 180 if you want the whole house.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, every 3 to 5 years, like people will spend that on dinner. People will spend that on Disneyland tickets, right? And why not on your biggest investment, your house? And then you don't even have to repaint the entire house. Like this is an investment. This isn't like a cost, because that bill is going to come due one way or the other. Because eventually you're going to sell that house. If you say, I'm never selling, I'm dying in this house, well, then your heirs are going to sell the house and have to deal with it. And so it's just 100%. Would you're laughing?
Oh, I
over
see
there.
it all the time. I mean, I'm laughing just because it's so common, where someone's lived in a house for 20 years. And they've done very little because the house was stucco. And they're like, oh, it's a stucco house. We're good. I don't need to paint. And then they get a $8,000 pest bill, right? Because they're trying to sell. Yeah. Someone needs to go to a home and they need some money. So they're going to sell the property. And then all that deferred maintenance comes due at once.
So wait, what do you mean? I thought stucco lasted forever.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, no. Stucco is porous. It's concrete. It's lightweight concrete. So paint helps stucco just like it helps wood siding, and especially around openings, right? You have a wall that's a solid, right, barrier against weather and the inside of the house. You cut windows into that wall. You cut doors into that wall. Those are all openings, right?
Yep.
Those openings have to be maintained. So if you're not caulking and painting around those openings, you're now opening up gaps for water to get in. And once water gets in, it does what water does, right? It's going to find level, but it's going to travel whatever it has to travel to find level. And so everything in that path is going to get affected eventually.
And this is why we tell, when we're sitting down with sellers in the living room, we're telling them 100% of the time, I don't care if your home is 1 year old, like brand new, or 100 years old, you're going to have to budget for some repairs. There's just things that come up with the home. And even if it's a stucco siding, the house is heating up and cooling down, Yep. The window frames are heating up and cooling down. We've all driven along like through neighborhoods and you see the cracks, or that people are like patching the cracks.
Especially the new stucco is a thinner stucco. It's a different system. So like the older homes, they have a 3-coat stucco. So that siding is about 1 inch to 1.25 inches thick, right? Which is a pretty good barrier, like it's a good membrane. The newer ones, it's like 3/8. It's just a 2-coat.
Why'd they change it?
There's a certain stucco system called EFIS that's more of a home inspector thing. Like I'm not a expert on EFIS, but like in Serrano, for instance, you'll see houses, they have, they shear them up. So they use particle board plywood sheets to tie all the framing together, give it structure. Then they'll paper it and then put a 1-inch foam. And then they just spray on a coat of stucco, right? That's like, 1/4 inch thick. And then they do a texture coat and they're done. And that's why the south and the west side of those houses, you'll see a lot of cracks because the house is expanding and they got this thin coat of stucco. And so, Serrano, there's parts of Serrano where the developers had issues with the windows because of that. You have a thinner stucco and then, you get openings around windows. And that was a thing for a little while.
Wow. See, this is another thing about hiring a good inspector is like a good inspector's out in the field day in and day out, and they know the different neighborhoods. There's trends. They know what to look for. They're not going in blind.
Yes.
Wow.
This stuff doesn't happen on the fly. Like it happens in a sequence.
So is there anything else in terms of maintenance that sellers should be on the the lookout for?
Caulking around windows, right? And then, you have a lot of storage under your sinks. Pull it out every now and then. See if you have water stains. Nobody really checks their plumbing, and you think it's okay. Well, you're shoving stuff in and out of those shelves, right? And so you're banging on that plumbing over and over, and sooner or later, you're going to have a gasket fail. It's going to crack. Absolutely.
I was walking in a house with a guy who flips homes for a living. That's what he does. And every single house he walks into, he looks under the sinks. He moves stuff around. He looks under the sinks. He's like, this is what he does for a living. For him, it's an investment. It might be your home, but guess what? Your home can also be an investment for you.
Hidden in plain sight.
Hidden in plain sight.
Same thing with toilets. Like toilets get loose.
Nobody
really
gosh,
thinks
that
about
wax.
Think how many times you flush a toilet. Like if it's the main toilet that everyone uses, like in the living areas, that toilet's getting used a lot. And if the wax seal gets, if it's loose, it's going to work that wax seal down until it's gone. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, every time you flush, a little bit of that water is getting underneath the flooring.
Yep. You may not see it, but it's getting under the flooring.
But it's there. Yeah, for sure.
So if you're sitting on a toilet and it's kind of wiggling around, man, you got to get that fixed.
Yeah, get a reset.
Do not wait.
That's like $160.
It's not a big deal, yeah. No. I mean, $160 is $160. We'd prefer to spend that on something other than a toilet.
You can get it cheaper. I mean, it's like you could do it yourself. YouTube has a ton of videos.
But if you don't get it fixed, like what's the cost?
Oh, I've seen, thousands of dollars, depending on the house, right? Like I've seen bathroom floors just get destroyed.
Yeah.
And then you have to rip the tile floor out. Right. And then, and if you're an escrow, that's a rough situation, which if
my gosh,
pre-list, there's no expectation for that bathroom. So you can change the flooring, maybe something cheaper. But if you're an escrow and there's an expectation for a tile floor, I mean, you're racking them up.
That's a perfect segue. So when we come back, we are going to be talking about the pre-list inspection and how it can save you thousands of dollars. We'll be right back.
You don't have to make the same mistakes that other homeowners have made when it comes to selling your home. Work with someone who knows what they're doing. Johnny Jennings and the Tom Daves real estate team, there's a reason why they are number one in all of Sacramento. Find out what kind of offers you would get on your home at tomdaves.com and how much you would get if you wanted a cash offer today. No matter what kind of condition your home is in, they can help if you don't have the time or money to make those repairs. Again, it's tomdaves.com or give Johnny Jennings a call at 855-TOM-DAVES. 855-TOM-DAVES.
This is Made for More Living with Johnny Jennings, powered by eXp Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
If you've been listening to the show, we have been covering things that cost thousands of dollars that buyers and sellers do not expect when they go to purchase or sell a home. And in this last little segment, we are going to be covering the benefits of a pre-listing inspection. But before we get into that and how it can save you tons of money and make your life a whole lot easier and happier, Matt, you said on the break you've seen you've personally inspected over 3,000 homes. Is that correct?
I'd say, it's roughly about 600 a year, give or take.
600 a year. And so out of those over 3,000 homes, almost 3,600 homes, what is your favorite style house? For those engineer types, for those people who are detail oriented, they're like, I want the best house with the minimal amount of deferred maintenance or,
I've thought about this way more than anybody probably. Like, this is where I dork out. So best house is north facing. So the front of your house is facing north, back of your house to the south. Cottage style, meaning the front is some type of wood siding, lap siding, whatever. And then stucco from the fence line on the left and the right or the east and the west all the way around. So the back three walls are stucco, the front's wood. So you don't have a stucco looking house, right? Mm-hmm. It gives its character. And then because it's facing north, it's opposite weather. So you're not having to shade the house from the sun, right? So you don't have to worry about planting trees. You can plant trees if they fit your curb appeal, but you don't have to clean up leaves, right? It's not necessary to keep the house cool.
Yeah.
And the paint is not getting hit by the weather. So the front of the house is going to stay fresher looking. Right? So, you see those south-facing houses, they get all beat up and faded, and you're like, ugh, right? A north-facing house, it's going to take way longer for that to happen, right? And then you have stucco, which is the least maintenance siding, covering the weather sides. So the south side, you have stucco siding, the west side, stucco siding. So if you maintain around the windows, right, you're pretty good. And then trees, like if you need shade because it gets hot back there, because that's the south side, you can plant as many trees as you want. And you don't have to worry about cleaning up the leaves because it's not exposed to the public area. So if you have 3 big old trees that cast shadows on your house, great. They drop a ton of leaves. It's not the front of your house. So you clean it up when you want. Like only people that see all the leaves in your backyard, you invite over.
Correct. In
right?
theory.
Yeah.
In
so
theory.
you control who gets to see it.
Yep.
I mean, technically. So north-facing house, cottage style. So wood up front, stucco on the back 3 walls. That is by far my favorite.
There you go.
Easiest to maintain.
You heard it. The easiest to maintain by Matt Zinger with Goodlife. But let's say you don't have the best house to maintain. Go ahead.
Sorry. What kind of foundation?
Oh, good question.
So personally, like I'm construction kind of guy, right? Like I have that kind of skill. I would prefer raised. It's just easier to change up things, especially plumbing. If you have a slab house, you got to, jackhammer concrete. So it would be a raised house for me. If you were looking for the least amount of maintenance and you were happy with the way the house is set up and you're not going to make any changes, slab all day. It's just easier.
There you go.
All right. Well, there you go. So let's talk about, let's say you don't have the perfect house. It's not, doesn't have
There's
the cottage style, doesn't have the stucco. You're going to sell the house and this is very common actually in the Bay Area. So we have a lot of people moving from the Bay Area, and so the buyers are selling the house in the Bay. It's a fraction the size of the home they're buying in the Sacramento region, and they're selling it for way more money, but they're moving out here, and they're like, where are the inspections? And it's like, okay, we'll make an offer, order your own inspections. That's how we do it over here. And they don't like that.
No.
And quite frankly, I tend to agree with that. Like inspections up front can save a whole lot of heartache and save deals and save sellers a lot of money. And it sets expectations for the buyers. And it's not just the Bay Area doing this. There's other countries around the world. This is it's a weird thing that we don't do it. And why do you think that is? Why do you think?
One of the other benefits about the Bay is like they only have to make one trip. Right? If you have the inspections done already, they make one trip, they find the house they like, they look at the inspections, bam, you got an offer. Mm-hmm. They don't have to come up on another weekend to like sit there while they do inspections.
And then renegotiate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I from my experience, some agents they think that starting with a pre-list is starting off on a bad foot. Like you're getting bad information or you're getting a negative to begin this, sale of the house. I can understand that, but that's a perspective. Right? And that's a perspective that can be pushed back on really quickly and easily. It's like, if you were going to sell a car, wouldn't you want to know the condition of the car before you marketed it? It's the same thing with a house, except on a bigger scale.
Exactly. This
right?
is like, you take the car for a test drive, you like the car, you're sitting down to fill out the paperwork, and then all of a sudden they lay out an inspection saying, oh, by the way, the transmission's slipping.
And then two of the sales lose the wind.
Why didn't you tell me this before?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like what I tell people, this is like an analogy, kind of a poker analogy. If you were going to sit down and play poker and I told you, hey, give me $150 and I'm going to show you 3 of the other cards you're going to be playing against before they even sit down and play them. Just $150. You're about to play high stakes poker.
Yep.
Wouldn't you pay me $150 to see 3 of their cards? You strategize totally differently. It's not a guessing game. Mm-hmm. And the pest report and the findings on the pest report, they not only change leverage, but that's like a main tool for negotiating.
Yep.
And so if you just have to pay a certain amount of money before you go negotiate for hundreds of thousands of dollars on a house, why not?
Yep. So that you bring up a really solid point, and we've discussed it a little bit earlier, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page, there's 2 main negotiations that take place when buying or selling a house. The first one is when you're negotiating the contract and you're saying, hey, let's
price,
right? Price and timelines and things like that. Then, but if you don't have the inspections, if you haven't done the pre-list, then you're basically negotiating blind. And then the inspections, the home, the roof, the pest, the septic, the pool, depending on what you have going on with the home, all those come in. Then the appraisal comes in, and the appraisal may have certain things on it that you could have known about before that are now surprises to both you and the buyer.
They would have been on the reports.
They would have been on the other reports, yeah.
Yep.
And so now the buyer has all this information, and a lot of times sellers go, well, I'm selling my house as is. I'm doing it as is. This is an as-is sale. And I tell them all the time, I get that. The standard residential purchase agreement contract states all purchases are as is, but the buyer has the opportunity to do inspections and then say, hey, I'd like these things fixed if we're going to move forward, or I'm going to back out of the deal.
Yes.
So the buyer has rights too. Okay. And so oftentimes sellers get caught up on that as is situation, and then they're blindsided by all of these things that would have come up on the pre-list.
In a tighter market, that's huge.
And you're dealing with timelines. And so let's say here's what I typically see go down. The seller, against the advice of a real estate agent, prices the home a little bit high because they want to have some margins to come down.
That's very typical.
Right? And so then they finally get an offer. It's the only offer on the table. And now their offer has been accepted on the home they're moving to. Maybe they're moving out of state. Maybe they're staying local. But now they're in contract.
Maximum pressure. Maximum
pressure. Now they're in contract on the next home, and the only way they get that home is if their current home sells.
Good old contingencies.
Right? And then they're getting ready to go. They're packing everything up, and then the inspections come back, and now you're negotiating the repairs. And now you feel like, hey, I have to figure out a way to make it work with this buyer, or I'm going to lose that next home.
You've given up all your leverage.
You've given up all the leverage.
All of it.
And so I see time and time again that costs sellers thousands and thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, all because they didn't want to spend how much on a pre-list?
Well, if for a pest, it's $150, right, for a slab. And then, like, a lot of people don't want to do, that's another reason they don't do pre-list is they figure the buyers are going to spend the money on the inspections. Like, why would I? Mm-hmm. And a home inspection is like, $300 to $500. So they don't want to spend, the home is usually the first one they don't want to spend money on for a pre-list. The pest then comes in second because it's cheaper. And we give estimates, so it can be used like as a weapon for a buyer. But what you're saying is 100% accurate, and I've lived it. And it's a shame, right? Because they have to get out. They have a house that they have to sell this one to get into. And now they're in a rock and a hard place where they were thinking they were in the driver's seat and then everything got flipped. And now instead of being proactive, you're completely reactionary.
And the worst part is, let's say you say, screw it, you know what, this is not working out. I cannot afford to do this. I'm just going to put the home back on the market and we'll figure it out later. Well, guess what? Now your home is essentially a pre-list home because you have to disclose all of the findings.
And you change the perspective on the market, right? Because you're relisting.
And it's like, why didn't the home sell? There's a stigma on the home.
That's it.
Right? And so just begin with the end in mind. Save yourself a whole lot of heartache. Get the pre-list from Goodlife Inspections. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So if you have any questions.
So where can they find more information about what you guys do?
Online, our website is Goodlife Group. We were formerly North American, so you can still look up North American Home Services, and it'll reroute you to Goodlife. We also do general construction services. So like if you move into a house and you want to renovate a kitchen, change a bathroom, whatever, we have the capacity to do that. We are a very large construction company who's diverse, right? There's nothing that happens at a house that we can't handle.
I don't like the term jack of all trades, master of none. Like you guys are like a jack of all trades,
masters of everything. All. Yes, we're masters of the universe. We're like the He-Man of inspecting and construction.
Well, thanks again for hopping on the show, Matt Zinger, with Goodlife Instruction. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week.